joining the Greensboro Bar Association. At the time, in 1950, when we came here, after Clyde graduated from law school, there was no woman member of the Greensboro Bar Association. Margaret Harris was here, and she's just a wonderful woman, of course, and I love Margaret. We've become very good friends, but she hadn't joined the Bar Association. I know you've interviewed her. I don't know whether you discussed that or not. You probably did. But she says Rufus Reynolds discouraged her, said, "You don't want to do that." So anyway, nobody discouraged me, and I didn't give it a thought. So I joined, Clyde and I joined together at the same time, I think before he went off to the Navy. But at any rate, I remember going to the bar meetings, and I remember numerous discussions about ladies' night, which didn't exist. There wasn't no such thing as ladies' night. And what they had was the annual picnic at the policeman's club. It was barbecue. And the discussion would go along the lines that we don't want to get all dressed up and be so formal. So they didn't want to have a ladies' night, but they'd assure me, "No, Liv, we're not talking about you now. You're very welcome." And I did feel welcome. Everybody was good and gracious and cordial to me, and I felt perfectly comfortable at the bar. So I'd go or not go as I chose, and I felt free to do either.
So were you the first female member?
I was.
Were you?
Yes.
Okay.
I have to give you my daddy's favorite statement when people ask me, "Well, how long do you work?" He said, "We work from Cape to Cape. Can't see when you start in the morning, can't see when you stop at night." But we worked tobacco and cotton, got up early in the morning, worked sometimes all day, and we started young.
You developed a work ethic early on, didn't you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you kept on it up to the very moment we're sitting here talking.
Well, yes, almost. I'll just leave it at that. I'm trying to get out of it, but it's hard.
I'm going to ask you about that later in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
You were told if you had no firm to send you around, hang around the courthouse. Just sit in on the courtrooms, and whenever court adjourned, get up, walk out, and stand out in the hall and look sort of ponderous as if you were thinking of some big legal thing. And you'd be surprised how many people who just come to watch the court, and with no particular television or radio going on then, a lot of people went to the courtroom for entertainment. And you'd be surprised how many people, seeing this young man, obviously a lawyer, he looks like a lawyer, would come up and say, "I've got a little problem. Can you draw a deed for me or check a title or something?" So you'd pick up business there.
Went into court and they told me, the members of the firm told me where I was supposed to sit. They go in there and you wait and you sit in these seats. Well, of course, I was sitting there and the bailiff comes up and says, "You can't sit here, you can't sit here," and he made me move. Well, of course, when big cases called and I get up and do it, that little bailiff came up. He was a friend to life after that, because he came over and he, of course, apologized profusely about making me get up and move.
Why did he make you move?
He didn't think I was an attorney.
I see.
He just thought I was somebody sitting in there. Well, he wasn't as bad as the judge. The first time I went into Superior Court, the judge looked down and looked at me and says, "How old are you?" I told him I had to have been 21 to take the bar, and that was all I had to admit.
I said, "Governor, I appreciate the appointment." I said, "But it'd take me 2 or 3 months to kind of wind down my law practice and everything." And that's when he told me that, said, "Well, the court meets again on February the 3rd, and I would like to have you on the bench when the court meets." And I said, "Well, no way in the world I can close out my practice in 2 or 3 weeks, He said, "Well, you can close out part of it and give it away to somebody and sell some of it to somebody and work at night even after you get on the court for a while." And to make a long story short, when that man made up his mind about something, I mean, he could really convince you to do it. And the bottom line is, when the court convened on February the 3rd at 9:30 that morning, I think that's when, 10 o'clock, whatever it was, I was on the bench with him. But Lord have mercy, you talking about work between the time he called me and that time, trying to close out a practice of many, many, many years and everything. But at any rate, we got
You did it well.
But right about that time, everybody had to pay income tax. Because they're making some money. Nobody ever had paid, and I knew ever paid income tax up to that time. It was everybody's ambition to make enough money to pay income tax, but nobody ever made enough, you know. But then, and all this money coming, then people had to pay income taxes. So Jimmy and I decided we could figure out how to fill out the income tax return. So we rented a place of business, Jimmy Randleman and I, right across the road from the shipyard, right where everybody had to come out the shipyard gates and walk by. We rented an office with a big sign, the income tax preparers. And God Almighty,
You got rich then.
we were, nobody knew anything about making things out. Everybody had to come through there and make their income. We charged $2 for the state return and $5 for the federal. It was a total of $7. Sitting here at a desk like this. And we bought us a desk. He bought a desk, I bought a desk. He would come in there and pay us all that money. I put it in my pocket, put it in every pocket full. First thing you know, I put my drawer and fill it in the drawer.
Put them in the drawer.
It got to be so I couldn't afford to get up and go to the bathroom. Lose too much money.
Oh, God.
Where I finally started kindergarten. And I went to school in Richmond until he was transferred to Syracuse, New York. And when I got up there, this Southern girl, I adjusted to the snow every day for months and months. But some of the teachers did not adjust to a Southern girl. And one of the teachers signed me up for speech impediment class and told me I was not to say yes ma'am. Luckily, the principal and the other teachers rescued me. And I did not have to attend speech impediment class.
I have had verdicts come in where I literally, I have my natural teeth, but if I had false teeth, they would have dropped out. Let's put it that way. They fool me sometimes, more so in criminal cases than civil. Most of the time, I can convene a little panel with my bailiff and my court reporter and my clerk, and we can huddle and kind of informally try to figure what the juror's going to do. Many times we're not too far off. In fact, I've tried to tell lawyers, I think sometimes, I believe this jury's going to go this way and this is what it is. The verdict will maybe fall in a range between these figures, and they're polite to me. But it's in one ear and out the other. And lo and behold, here it comes right where. So we spend a week getting where we were a week before, trying to push them a little bit to maybe think about settling.
Jack represents the husband and I represent the wife. And we're going to have a four-way, which is announced to be a four-way settlement conference at my office. And my client and her parents arrived early and said, we really don't want to meet with him. Is there someplace we can be? And I said, yeah, you can just be in that room there. That'll be fine. And we'll be in this room. So Jack and his buddy show up, and we go in.
That's his client.
His client, yes. And the guy said, where's my wife? And I said, well, she's in the building, but she said that she would prefer not to meet, at least in the early going. Now, if we get to the place where we might be having a settlement, we bring her in. Well, I want a four-way conference. I said, well, there's not going to be a four-way conference right now. Okay. So Jack and I start talking. And This guy starts interrupting me. And I said, look, I said, if you want to make a comment, tell Mr. Floyd, and Mr. Floyd will tell me. But don't interrupt. You're not my daddy. I said, no, I'm not your daddy, but I'm telling you how we're going to do this. He gets up and walks out. I said to Jack, I said, well, it's been a short conference. He said, well, let's go on. We sort through all this stuff, equitable distribution, you know. And so we do. A little while, he comes back in, sits back down. And we sit there, and we keep talking, and he doesn't say anything. He just sits there, and he gets up and leaves again. I said, what's the matter with your guy? He said, I don't know. You know. So we continue on, and in a few minutes, he comes back in and sits down again. Well, this time, he's only there for about 90 seconds. Bounces out of that chair, out the door. And I heard the outside door of the office, which was right there in our conference room, right beside the door. I heard it open and close. And I said, well, I guess he left you. Well, in a little bit, the receptionist comes in and says, Mr. Griffield, he's gone in there with his spouse, wife, and her parents. And I walked in, and he was sitting at the table, he had on a windbreaker. And I said, Mr. So-and-so, if you don't leave this room right now, I'm going to call the police. And he stood up, and we weren't much further apart than we are right now. And he reached under his windbreaker with his left hand and pulled out a 9mm pistol and said, you son of a bitch, I'm going to kill you. And he had the gun in this hand. And let's see, how did I do this? I grabbed his arm and grabbed his throat and wrestled around the room and down. And I said, if you don't drop that damn gun, I'm going to break your neck. And he just looked at me. And I just started, squeezed him real good. And he dropped the gun. And about that time, Eric Hallis came running in. He's an Army Ranger. And he said, I said, Eric, hold this guy and get up. And so Eric gets hold of him, and he said, don't move. And the guy starts thrashing around. Eric hit him. I mean, he laid it to him. The sheriff's office apparently was in hysterics when he showed up at the jail. They said, you certainly picked the wrong group to start messing with, didn't you? So then the gun went off in the midst of all this and shot a hole, nicked the door frame and shot a hole in the wall in the corridor. And Stuart
This is in your office.
at our office, yeah. And Stuart Albright at that time was the DA, and he said, I want that bullet. Can we get it out of the wall? And I said, well, yeah, it's a panel wall. We can get it out. I said, why do you want it? He said, I'll tell you why, Steve. When I try that guy for attempted murder, I'm going to have a metal ashtray on the table. And when I'm talking to the jury, and I'm going to say, and this is what he wanted to put in that man, clank.
I must say that I have a son named Bob Douglas. Not long ago, I was telling a friend, I said, all these years I've been introduced, oh yeah, he was the grandson of the debating Stephen A. Douglas. Now, just when I think I'm making it on my own, I don't do it. You must be Bob Douglas' daddy. My son Bob gets around a whole lot more than I, knows more people, knows more lawyers here than I do. So I've gone from a descendant to an ancestor, never quite made it on my own.
I wanted to say, when as you said, I was later named to the bench. I guess we'll get to that in a minute, but after it was announced that I was going to be the new Superior Court judge here, I still have several matters to try, and one of them was in his court. And so he walked in to try my case and motioned me up to the bench and said, well, I see that Governor Moore is going to appoint you to the Superior Court bench. And I said, that's right. He said, my God, Jim, you just learned how to try a case.
I remember, I was talking about the young lawyers. When I first started practicing law, I'm not going to name any names. My father said, I want to take the list of the Greensboro Bar Association, one by one, and want to tell you how to deal with them. And the first man, and I don't know who it was now, I wouldn't tell you if I did, my father said his word is his bond. If he'll tell you continuance, extension of time, anything in the world, you can rely on it. Don't bother to get in writing. Came down to the second one. Says, real important things you better get in writing. He won't deny that he said so-and-so, but he'll find some way to scram out of it. So you better get, if you deal with him, get in writing. He came to 2 or 3 others who were good men of their word. He came to somebody, says, no matter what he tells you, you draw an order or a contract and you get him to sign it. He's forgetful. And went on down the list, and I remember this sort of advice to young lawyers. We came to a man and Dad said, now this man tries hard. He thinks he's honest, but he'll do a whole lot of things that you wouldn't do and you ought not to do. And I said, well, he's dishonest then. Dad said, now just a minute. He says, you young man in your 20s, you got no family. You know I'll feed you if you don't make enough money. And the lawyer we're talking about has got 5 children. He doesn't have much law practice. And he's just got to cut corners. And he says, when you've got responsibilities like that, I think the Lord in heaven looks down and says, well, I'm going to excuse him. He was trying to get food for his children. And he says, my dad, I think some lawyers should be held to a higher sense of accountability based on where they are and what their other responsibilities are. So he says, when you talk to lawyer so-and-so, don't get upset. Just remember that he can't quite hew the line like you can. And we went on down the list there.
And we had a principal named Miss Irvin. She was Hunter Irvin, the one-armed lady. And the story was that there was an electric switch in her office. And all the children were frightened by that electric switch. And I took it up with my father, and he confirmed that there was an electric switch in the office. And that really helped my behavior pretty much. I remember going to the principal's office one time, and she had an 18-inch ruler that was thick. And she heard what the charge was, and I was convicted immediately. And she told me to put my hand on the desk, palm up. And I did that. And they just whaled the devil out of my hand with that 18-inch ruler. I never went back. I behaved from then on.
Well, that's a good question. I remember first hearing about the law when my grandfather would say, they lived just a block from us, Margaret ought to be a lawyer. She argues all the time and she asks questions all the time, and I didn't pay any attention to it. But then one of my father's cousins, Edgar Richardson, was a well-respected attorney in Reading, and his daughter was my age, and I got to, being friends with her, and we'd go to his office, and I always loved working at a desk. From little on up, we each had our own desks in the study at home, and where we do our homework. 4 desks around the room, plus Daddy's in the corner. And they'd get bigger and bigger, and the first desk Ken and I had in our office was my desk from home. And they sent it down. It was just a desk.
I remember seeing a poster that Pooh Bailey had on his wall, and you've probably heard this, that Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for I am the meanest son of a bitch in the valley. And that pretty well summed him up. Winston Churchill was talking to somebody and they said so-and-so is a very humble person, and Winston Churchill said he has a lot to be humble about.
Yeah.
I serve with people, not many, but some people who are sour. And you wonder, my gosh, how did they ever get elected? They rarely smile, rarely speak to people. But I think people expect elected officials, Fred, to be accessible. And I think they have every right to demand that. I recall I spoke with a friend of mine in the mountains who was thinking about running for Congress in his district. But he said to me, he said, if I'm elected, I will not ride in one Christmas parade. I said, I don't believe I would make that a campaign pledge. And he's the kind of guy, if he had been elected, I can assure you he would not have ridden in one parade. He wouldn't do it. But I think people expect to see there's Congressman Jones or Congressman Coble or Congressman Bernhardt riding in a parade, particularly the smaller towns. They embrace those parades very warmly. And I think accessibility comes into it, Fred, accessibility with a smile.
Times were hard, and over at the Mayfair restaurant, which is over where the First Union building, not the present First Union, over the corner of Elm and Gaston or Friendly, there was Boyd Morris's father had a cafeteria, a friendly cafeteria. And for about 40 cents, you could get a plate with the meat and 2 vegetables and bread. And for 10 cents, you get a piece of cake or a piece of pie. But even that was expensive. Now, I don't know whether the young lawyers initiated or whether the high sheriff, but word got out that up on the 4th floor of the what's the old courthouse building now, there was a jail. Up on the 4th floor, the sheriff had a particular fund allotted for cornbread and buttermilk for the prisoners. And pretty soon we established the practice, us young lawyers in the courthouse over there, when it came 12:30 or so, we would go up to the 4th floor, go into one of the cells, and for 15 cents, we could get all the buttermilk and all the cornbread. And I've been a lover of buttermilk all my life, but you get a big tall glass of buttermilk and take a whole lot of cornbread and put it in there, and they'd eat it with a spoon and come back for seconds or thirds. And it was a real filling meal. It wasn't quite as good, or good for you maybe, as going over to the Mayfair cafeteria, but you saved a lot of money.
I wasn't that crazy about Boston. I was part of the time, but other parts of the time I just really didn't like it that much. And especially the fact that lead work is kind of repetitious. But it was a good job, and they were paying me very well. I was doing as well at that point as my contemporaries who went into private practice. So, but then I asked if I could be transferred back near where my home was. And they said, well, you signed a commitment that you could not work in your home state, and you have to stay 4 years. And I said, yes, I remember I did that. So I said, but I'd like to get close to Atlanta. And they said, well, you can go to, if you finish up all your cases, and I had about 150 cases open. If you finish up all your cases, you can go at your own expense to Jacksonville, Birmingham, or Greensboro. Well, I'd been to both Birmingham and Jacksonville, and didn't want to go there, so I thought, well, South Carolina sounded fine. At the time, I didn't know that Greensboro might be somewhere other than South Carolina. Well, I found out soon that it was in North Carolina, so that's fine, I'll go there. So that's what I did. So I finished up my cases and drove down to Atlanta, drove down to Greensboro in 1957.
And I guess I'm biased in this. I don't think there's a better bar than in Guilford County. And I include High Point in that too. I don't think there's a place in the state that I worked where lawyers get along any better.